Hello everyone and welcome to the Streamlining, Shutdowns and Turnarounds with the Use of Technology webinar. My name is Carla Sharp from Petrochemical Update. I'm a Senior Director there and I'll be introducing our speakers today and kicking things off. So this webinar is being brought to you in association with the upcoming Downstream Engineering and Construction Conference and Exhibition that's taking place in June on the 15th and 16th in New Orleans. The meeting will have a dedicated track for turnarounds and also maintenance and reliability. So this webinar ties in very, very nicely. There are over 150 of you signed up today, so thank you very much for joining and thank you to our panelists in advance for their time and sharing their experience. Just a brief bit of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar will last approximately 60 minutes and it is being recorded. So we'll send you the full audio recordings and presentations next week in case you want to listen again or share with your colleagues. Please ask lots of questions throughout. You can do that by simply sending them through the questions box on your screen, and our panelists will answer all of the questions after the presentation. Given that projects across the downstream industry are facing increasing pressures to become leaner, reducing costs, man hours, downtime and so on, as well as the fact that a huge percentage of turnarounds are still not coming in on time or budget, as Jack and Peter will discuss later. The primary purpose of this webinar is to discuss how technology can and is changing the game in one of the core areas, contract management. So joining us today to address this and share their experiences via the story of Sarah, a supply chain manager at a US refinery, are Jack Leahy and Peter Young of Aviva Procon. Jack and Peter will share their experiences along with some key stats and insight into the challenges and opportunities in contract management for the industry. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jack and Peter to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Welcome to today's webinar from Aviva Procon, everyone. This is Jack Leahy. I'm in charge of global sales for Aviva Procon. And Peter?
Yeah, hello there. I'm Peter Young. I'm supply chain manager and also a consultant to Aviva Procon. Shutdowns, turnarounds and outages, or STOs as we're going to abbreviate them today, are extremely complex elements in the life cycle of any downstream operation, as I'm sure everybody knows. We're going to use a composite case study, which we're calling Sarah's Journey, to try and cut through and streamline the complexity and hopefully to resonate with you, our audience. Looking at the attendee list, we've got an audience of extremely experienced professionals, people who manage vendor qualifications, tendering, contractor selection, contract awards, change management, invoicing and payment processes, all to support STO contracts and ultimately supporting STOs themselves.
Yeah, today our webinar will draw on these experiences of Sarah, our fictional, newly appointed STO team member, supporting the STO planning and execution. And she's been tasked with identifying possible work processes for improvements, as Peter said, for contract selection, through the tendering process, to contract award, and the application for payments and actual payments to those contractors for the work that they perform on STOs. And we'll be proposing a complete solution to her Vice President of Maintenance and Refinery management team and propose what to do forward, moving forward.
Yeah, three areas that we're going to focus today for managing contracting and payment risks during STOs are the people, the systems and processes, and contracting, invoicing and payment strategy.
Okay, next slide. Again, my name is Jack Leahy, and I am in charge of sales globally for Procon.
Yeah, and I'm Peter Young. I'm a supply chain manager, more than 30 years experience, upstream, downstream and corporate, and now also a consultant to Aviva Procon. Welcome to Sarah's Journey.
Hey, we hope this case study will resonate with everyone involved in STOs and that are on the webinar today. And that while I think many people here have always been looking for solutions for the challenges and risks in turnarounds, we hope in this webinar to put the case forward for putting a contract management solution front and center in your STO planning and execution processes. Delays in the US and UK refinery startups are around 30% of monthly production losses. Somewhere around 80% of startups do not restart on time, and it has an average slippage of about 5 days. That is a tremendous impact on profits and revenues of these facilities. There's been no new refineries built in the U.S. since 1976. I think currently it's about 142 refineries, down from 223 in 1985. The average plant size has increased from 74,000 barrels a day in 1985 to a present 128,000 barrels a day. And the utilization of these plants is also quite high, north of 80% and 85% for each plant. In 2015, record margins were achieved with the U.S. refiners. And I think each one of the refining teams are looking for ways to have strategic investments to maintain these very high margins, and including, I think, investments and better strategies for turnarounds to further increase their margins.
This webinar tells the story of Sarah, a newly hired supply chain manager in a refinery. Sarah's basically been recruited to assess the current contracting and payment processes around STOs and improve the overall performance.
Just a bit of background before we start. A shutdown, depending on its size and complexity, will be planned for a year or more in advance, depending on the long lead time of equipment that you have that you're procuring. Sarah has to assess this STO contracting and payment work processes for upcoming STOs and to report these lessons learned and recommendations to the refinery management team. Implementation here is to include, as part of the planning process for STO, scheduled in 18 months out.
Yeah, and taking a quick look at Sarah's background, she's got a good honors degree in engineering, and under her belt she now has about 10 years experience in supply chain, the whole gamut, contracts, procurement, materials management, logistics. She's used Procon for some of the past 10 years and has learned the considerable benefits using this particular contract management tool. She comes from another oil and gas major, but her experience is mainly around upstream facilities engineering projects, the small to medium-sized projects on facilities. She comes to this refinery with an excellent resume and references and has all the right experience to take it to the next level, including management of teams, great interpersonal skills, excellent analytical track record. So she's been identified by this refining company as offering a new perspective on STOs, particularly building on planning and execution. So across construction, engineering, turnarounds and maintenance, the industry is really guilty of being stuck in their ways a lot of the time, but change is happening thanks to people like Sarah as a new kind of hero, if you like. She's expected to operate initially as an internal consultant as well as head up both the operations and STO project supply chain management teams. And she's been asked to use her skills to try and work out why, despite 2 years of good planning for each turnaround and months of preparation for a shutdown, they still fail to achieve startup in a timely and cost-effective fashion. They previously brought in external consultants in the past, and they've always implemented their recommendations. They're willing to make the changes, but delays still occur. And as a side note, Oracle recently said that 70% of refineries don't start up on time or on budget. And even further, Bobby Singh, the turnaround expert at Project Insurance, claims that 90% don't start up on time or on budget.
Well, it's a big number. These delays and cost overruns we talked about earlier on the slide that were about 30% with an average slippage of 5 days. This average slippage of 5 days can result in a budget overrun of 120%. If you look at the average turnaround, that's about $39 million in value. 1 day of overrun is usually about $1.4 million estimated of lost production. And if it's a 5-day average slip, that means that these loss in productions can equal $8 million for a turnaround that is late starting up on average. And as we said earlier, there's not any new refineries. Everyone's trying to get more out of the assets that they have in the ground. And not only they're getting higher capacities, higher utilization rates, and higher margins. And so I think the turnaround improvement is one of the areas that I think has gotten a lot of attention recently from senior management and to continue these increases.
Sure, and I think a specific example could be useful here. Valero's St. Charles refinery usually plans for a 29-day turnaround. The industry average is about 36 days. And they plan for this every 3 to 5 years. Costs normally something in the region of $39 million. But a single day's slippage for Valero in startup costs them anything between 1.2 and 3 million.
Yeah, that's loss of production and increased cost. And this picture is very similar, in Europe and elsewhere around the developed world, with everyone operating fewer, older refineries and focused on increasing capacity and margins. Peter, do you think we need to define the terms before we start?
Yes, thanks Jack, just for a little bit of clarity, the commonly agreed terms that I'm used to and hopefully are industry standards, so just very quickly, planned shutdown normally lasts for 1 to 2 weeks and is planned annually. A planned turnaround can last anything from 3 to 9 weeks normally, and again is planned every 3 to 5 years. Then you've got your outages, which are unplanned shutdowns, which can last anything from 2 to 4 weeks, and anybody knows with emergency shutdowns. And of course these planned outages are critical not just for sustaining production but also for safety, environmental protection, and avoiding those emergency and unplanned shutdowns, of course.
Yes, Peter, and it's worth noting in the USA, according to the Federal Trade Commission, that these delays to the planned outages and turnaround shutdowns accounted for more than 600 barrels lost of production, and the unplanned outages considerably more as well, at another 200,000 barrels lost of production. Well, let's walk with Sarah on her first week in the new job, shall we?
Okay, yeah. Sarah's first stop is to go see Adam, who's the managing director of the refinery, get his take on the current situation, summarize the risks, and just clarify what her role should be. And this is what he told her in the first week. STO performance could be a huge source of competitive advantage, particularly if you can get to start up on time. But also it carries with it significant risks. The risks of obviously lost revenues around any scheduled delays, increased OPEX, real significant damage to customer relations, and share price sensitivity to STOs, particularly in a time where there's increasing regulatory uncertainty around the globe. And finally, then the MD says there's a staff morale issue, and he's even heard word that involvement in STOs could be potentially career damaging for some people.
Yes, we've already mentioned some of these numbers on this, so Adam's comments are no surprise. After getting the 30,000-foot perspective here, Sarah's next stop is to see the outgoing supply chain manager, Sam.
Yeah, and Sam's take is that, well, she's inheriting from him a new lean and mean organization, which has considerable advantages. They've stripped out a lot of waste and got a very lean team, but it also means challenges as well. And they have yet really to have the processes they need to support the resources that they do have available. Also, Sam thinks that STOs are a bit like major capital projects, but there are some key differences. They're much faster track, clearly schedule driven, sometimes at all costs. They have huge visibility with the high-level stakeholders. They're incredibly complex and they're performance focused. In this particular refinery, the whole STO processes are driven by maintenance and engineering, and also it's people-driven, not process-driven. So, and I can attest to this from my own experience, where you've got 2 or 3 heroes that have got 3 or 4 turnarounds under their belt. They're the people who make all the key decisions, and they have all the information at their fingertips. Also, one criticism that Sam's found is that the work teams just go off and do their own thing. There's a lack of cohesion. They're focused on delivering, and they don't look around and see what the other teams. There's no coordination. The refinery is incredibly good at planning, but they still get these delays, they get incidents, and they get shortcuts.
Well, Sam certainly touches on all the areas in which we wish to address today: people, processes, systems, and the strategy. Next stop, Sarah will meet with Phil. Phil is the refinery maintenance and STO project and engineering manager.
Yeah, to Phil, the contracts group is just bound up in red tape. They're seen as a road bump, a blockage. They're the people who are slowing things down when it needs to be blowing and going. Generally, he sees the contractors do a very good job under difficult circumstances, but sometimes they just have to cut corners to get the job done. One of the key issues that he does find a bit of a problem with his various engineering managers, they have no visibility on the contract terms, so they feel like they're flying blind about what's been agreed specifically with each one of the various contractors. Also, they get no visibility on possible delays coming up, cost impacts, potential costs. They get daily and weekly contractor reports, but they're always after the fact. So there's an opportunity for them to get proactive. And according to studies he's read carried out by Ryder Hunt International, the number of contractors just increases exponentially during turnarounds to something like 300% the normal operational load, and that just puts a strain on his safety inductions, isolation training, procedures, materials, equipment, and supply. And then finally, up to 30% of a contractor's working day is lost due to training, problem resolution, admin issues.
Well, it sounds to me like Phil is inviting Sarah to make some changes, especially around the improvement of contractor selections, the transparency of contractor hours and their daily costs, and especially to be more flexible when change occurs.
Sure, yeah, and as we'll see, Sarah clearly needs a contract management solution and processes that fully support these needs.
There's a number of technologies out there that could attempt to address one or more of these highlighted issues. Of course, we work for Procon, so we're going to be slightly biased here. We'll be just discussing the solution elements needed to improve broadly the processes here, so that you can make up your minds of whether the contract management system should be front and center in your solution for STOs. At the end of the first week, Sarah's absorbed the feedback she's received from the STO maintenance teams and the management.
Yes, and this is her summary of the risks and drivers for the type of changes to be made. The contracts group urgently needs to demonstrate more added value to the stakeholders. Contractors also need to have better visibility and consistency on what the client needs to improve STO performance. There's urgently needed visibility internally on the contract terms so that everybody can be on the same page and get involved. And any good contract management solution will offer visibility on potential delays and costs, and this seems to be needed by all the STO team members. Specifically, visibility into contractor logged hours verified by gate pass data, contract change management, and auto-reconciled applications for payment and invoices will help reduce invoice leakage. The systems that are in place, processes will need to be put in place to improve the vendor selection and maintain challenging tendering schedules. There's an opportunity to regain some of that 30% lost on each contractor's day by reducing their admin needs. And maybe there's a need for a process, not people focus, and leverage those heroes that get them to share their knowledge and mentor people more effectively. When I worked in UK refineries, dependence on those few heroes was considered a strength, but it's actually a source of potential weakness as they move on and retire, or dependence on their effectiveness to train and mentor good people. So good planning needs to be supported by good contract management processes to optimize contractor selection and keep costs down.
So what are Sarah's initial conclusions around the role of an online contract management system might play in the future?
Well, I think a robust contract management system will fill a critical gap as we've currently identified in STO contracting and payment risk management. Interestingly, it supports lean organizations and processes by just promoting open, transparent, collaborative, collegiate working. So it makes more effective use of teamwork. That also leads to experienced contract professionals being able to better develop, monitor, and mentor high potential but inexperienced staff. And that's one area I found particularly useful with a good system. Fundamentally, it changes the old siloed ways of working by actively engaging all the stakeholders on both sides of the firewall, so that's contractors and owners, in the contracting process. So something like Procon will drive best practice sharing and overall transparency, so you don't have to keep returning or reinventing the wheel. Now there are several systems out there which manage many aspects of contract controls. Track software, for example, does time card gate pass integration for invoicing and payments, and there are tendering systems out there, ProBid, Aconex, etc. But if you add capital expenditure and capital upgrades to the mix of an STO, then Procon starts to stand out as being a bit unique.
In Sarah's second week, she focuses on her own team. She wants to gather their particular take on how things stand and what improvements they believe are needed.
Yeah, to start with, the contracts group just feels blamed all the time for delays and for poor performance. So obviously that leads to poor morale. They also have identified to Sarah that contractors seem to be incentivized for cutting corners if they can save time. They also find that with contractors, qualified people are getting harder to find. There's a general, when things are blowing and going and you're in the thick of execution, informal communications come to the fore, a lot of communication verbally, face-to-face decisions being made on the fly, a lot of emails flying, often contradictory or conflicting, and phone calls as well. There's no visibility on potential claims, potential delays, potential costs. As we already noted, reports are always after the fact, which means the contracts group feel they're always reactive. They finally hear about things after the fact and they're on their back foot. And generally when in this case the shutdown or turnaround's going on, cost control just isn't a factor. It's just go do it, just get it done. Between the various teams, there's very little communication going on. We've heard that previously. Another issue is they've been using the same old contract forms, same as last time, and they just add new rate schedules each time, which means that many of the problems that are baked into the contract forms, the types of contract, and the terms and conditions, they just get doomed to repeat them. And they wonder what it would take in this sort of lean environment to break out and work on some new ones. And finally, claims, well, they get settled after the dust settles. So long after the shutdown or the turnaround has taken place, there's haggling going on and muddled negotiations to settle claims.
Well, this all sounds so familiar, just not in refineries and the STO world, but we see similar challenges in construction maintenance organizations across many industries and project types. So after discussions with the troops, Sarah's put together her assessment of the changes needed to address this clear and identified risks.
Yeah, she sees that improved transparency is going to help her contracts guys eliminate that blame culture, and it's going to increase that collegiate working and make a one-team approach, which is critical really to the whole cultural change needs. Contractors as well are going to need to be incentivized for anticipating risk and offering solutions. They're the people at the sharp end. They can see these issues coming. They need to be incentivized to report them, but you need a system that promotes this and contracting terms that promote this as well. Formal communications using a system like Procon will give you the audit trails you need and the clarity as changes are made. So while change management in STOs by its very nature is very fast moving, a central contract management system would be used for tracking large changes, new contracts, and most other changes that are initially verbally approved on site but then have to be formalized by end of day. And that could be done by any of the team member, contracts engineer or project manager. And a contract management system, a good one, will also ideally offer visibility on potential risks and claims. And so it would enable the engineers, the contracts advisors, cost and planning guys, all to quantify delays, costs below the line as they arise. They can come from a variety of sources. Minutes of meetings, emails, trend analysis, and they can be a significant source of added value as those get visibility with management and the rest of the contracts team. Generally, any system has got to promote communications from and between all the users, but particularly internal users when you've got an STO going on. Contract strategy, it's got to be developed which leverages competition out there and also factors in a firm basis on prior performance and capabilities and quality. If you can anticipate claims, you can manage them proactively. That means you can reduce them significantly. And they offer visibility in quantifying any breaking news type issues so that they can be eradicated before they even become claims.
Great. Now let's move into the early phase of the pre-award of a shutdown contracts. Let's see what the challenges Sarah faces in this part of her journey.
Yeah, well, it becomes very challenging very quickly. This is the period after all the planning is over, things are accelerating, and everyone's under pressure to finalize the negotiations and ink those contracts. And this is what Sarah found in those final stages of pre-award. Bidder negotiations just stalled, and this was largely due to insufficient resources on the supply chain management team. So there weren't enough contracts people involved, so the status tracking unraveled. People tend to be out there working their spreadsheets, and a lot of the time they weren't sure what status was. So within each contract, silos formed around those negotiations, and the bidders saw a real opportunity here. So they started withdrawing prior agreed concessions, and I've seen this time after time. Those concessions could be major ones like removing or reducing liquidated damages, diluting milestones, eroding liabilities, or even environmental KPIs being removed in their entirety. So historic data gets lost at this point, and it just resides in personal spreadsheets. There's no version control there, and it's sitting in various standalone systems.
Wow, a lot of issues coming out already, Peter. You have resourcing, you have failure to operate in a joined-up fashion, and your bidders end up taking advantage of that fact.
Yeah, Jack, there was a lot of confusion over negotiation status at this point, and the bidders just took advantage of it. Not enough experienced staff resources on the negotiating side for the owner, and behind that there was no system which gave everyone the full picture, a single source of truth, if you like.
This seems like an ideal opportunity for a system such as Procon to resolve these problems. Bidder negotiations can be managed all in the system, made available to all stakeholders with visibility, and tackled jointly in a coordinated and timely fashion.
Yeah, and silos will be eliminated by the effective use of customizable workflows that are fit for purpose and very efficient.
Yes, Peter, and when bidders' concessions are formally documented in a system like this, they're so much more difficult to withdraw or renegotiate.
Yeah, and historic data is all centrally maintained, it's available online and time-stamped, so you've got full audit trails. You get complete version control for all your documentation associated with the contract negotiations. And moving on to the next month, Sarah's able to watch the shutdown unfold post-award, so the contracts are placed and the people are starting to mobilize, to see just how the contracts and the teams using them operate. And some of the issues she observed in the earlier month obviously come up again. So let's see how these risks develop.
For a start, there's too few dedicated STO contract resources, and that result is a patchy kind of rollout of the kickoff meetings, the reports and the inductions. Package managers tend to be flying blind with no view of agreements made, so they find it hard to enforce what was signed, and then no teeth in some of these contracts as a result of the pre-award negotiation issues.
Yeah, and of course any delays or surprises during execution can't be proactively managed or mitigated under those circumstances. You're constantly on your back foot.
Yeah, so again, a good contract management system clearly offers some major support to Sarah in resolving many of these issues.
Yeah, while the system obviously can't give you additional staff, this collegiate, transparent approach, which is a major feature of a system, will allow the team to leverage high potential, inexperienced contract staff who can easily be supported and mentored even in a shutdown situation.
Yeah, so a lean but dedicated STO contract team is able to better share all the knowledge that they have, the templates, the best practices, and overall just work in a more efficient way.
Yeah, and at this point, kickoff meetings and inductions, they can be rolled out using shared templates. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. They're all documented in system. I quite recently had a situation where potentially major issues on the contract have surfaced, misunderstandings have surfaced during the kickoff meetings. So these can all be panned out and documented as part of the chronicle feature in a system like Procon. So when package managers or anyone involved in the contract have complete view of their agreements, then any negotiated teeth are maintained and enforced. There is less erosion in the terms and conditions when you have full visibility.
The ability to flag up potential risks, such as cost deviations, potential claims, or delays during execution. These are given visibility to the company so they are anticipated and they are jointly and proactively managed. This must be using like the communications hub to do this work. A mobile app for Procon would help this, and the ability to communicate.
Yeah, and finally, when you're in the middle of the early STO execution, both sides of the contract will have a significant number of key deliverables. And while these are all listed out in the contract, it really takes a dedicated system to manage, say, 2,000 key deliverables, and that benefits both sides.
During the main period of shutdown execution, Sarah has the opportunity to go back and talk to everyone in her team and gather data and learn how they think this went.
Well, this is what Sarah's team told her, that the contract staff just felt overwhelmed. They were unable to provide the big picture as the number of work packages multiplied. She also noticed early signs of staff turnover, which in contracts management, cost planning, results in a dangerous loss of continuity and morale. She also found out that changes just got unilaterally imposed by contractors. So without a robust management of change process around contracts, outside of email and minutes of meetings, then you get these changes just imposed and no way of dealing with them. And of course, informal communications multiplied. There were mixed messages, emails flying around, and all audit trails were lost around changes and claims.
And all of the above led to unhappy package managers, customers, unable to verify claims, billings, or changes, even after the shutdown was finished. Issues with the broad restartup of delays and just many cost increases.
Yeah, at this stage, the benefits of a system was becoming clear to everyone involved in this shutdown. And the STO contract staff would be able to use the system to share the workload and involve all the stakeholders. But particularly, they'll be able to add value by providing that single big picture at whatever level it's needed, whether it's the refinery manager or an individual package manager or engineer. And again, team working using central information on a single system, a single source of truth, gives you the visibility you need, and team working improves morale and obviously reduces staff turnover.
All changes would be controlled in the system, clear communications on all sides, and this really reduces uncertainty and scope creep. Formal communications are absolutely necessary and kind of puts the end to some emails and phone calls. But in turnarounds, we know the fast pace of which this happens, and there are sometimes necessities for verbal or phone calls or quick communications. But the contracts team would have the ability to document those in a formal system and then get those approved by the contractors as formal communications.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I've seen a robust, good, disciplined contract management system create a sort of virtuous circle just by providing timely, complete information throughout the contract cycle so that you've got happy package managers and customers.
Transparency and control over review and management of claims, the invoices, billings, and the changes to those invoices and billings. The use of custom design workflows and the ability to see these earlier reduces these risks significantly. Some Procon users are even now talking about zero claim contracts and projects. So now Sarah's in her 4th month and she sits down to run through all the contract-related risks that she has encountered earlier or could possibly encounter in the future. This would form a part of a report and the recommendations to the management team, even maybe the board, in the preparation for the turnaround.
Yeah, and her top contract-related risks are all the usual suspects. So they included, number one, obviously, safety, environmental, then need to develop and effectively drive common STO processes across the organization. Avoid scope creep, so nail down the scope in those contracts. Capture live, relevant information and metrics around KPIs. She obviously needs a robust contract management system. She needs to address misaligned reactive teams, avoid them becoming demoralized. And she's got to get enough qualified, motivated resources and have them available during the peak on STOs. They clearly need to better manage stakeholder expectations, and they need to coordinate better complex, numerous resources. Got to prevent invoice leakage. I often hear numbers around 10% around inflated invoices that need rationalizing and checking. And then there are claims at the end of the shutdown, turnaround, or outage, even after it's closed out. Just maintaining the aggressive tendering schedules would be a huge benefit and mitigate a lot of risks. And contractor selection. This is probably one of the most important parts of any contract, and that's the name of the contractor on the paper is the right one. And learn how to manage an STO when there are capital improvements also bundled into that project.
Yeah, Sarah also notes that STOs should become a whole business event, and the analogy is kind of like the old phrase, bringing up children. It takes a whole village. All the stakeholders in the refinery or in the facility have to take particularly note and work as a team to make these things successful after we reviewed how much can be lost of profits and revenues. In Sarah's report to the management and the board, she has recommended into 3 categories: contractor selection, contracting and sourcing objectives, people objectives, and last, systems and processes for managing STO processes and risks.
Yeah, taking the first one, Sarah's got the following thoughts around contractor selection, contracting, and sourcing. The immediate needs are drive contractor quality up by leveraging competitive selection processes and evaluation models. Emphasize past performance against initial standard KPIs like HSE, cost, schedule, and quality of staff. She also immediately requires new forms of contract. Compensation models need to be better aligned to the work scopes, so she can start considering hybrid contracts, incentives, targets, and even in some cases turnkey lump sum. She also needs forms of contract that incentivize contractors for proactivity, this advanced warning, this avoidance and prevention. Looking toward the medium term, getting ready for the turnaround which is planned for next year. She needs to implement a contract management solution, something like Procon for all the STOs. And then looking ahead to the longer term, beyond the next turnaround, she wants to start driving ongoing contractor cost reductions, so leveraging further the prior experience and jointly identified opportunities with the contractors, renegotiate existing agreements, optimize scope around contractor capabilities and better definition of scope, which requires internal coordination between the various groups, and then generally working collaboratively with the contractors over the longer term for productivity enhancements.
Yes, once a contract management solution is implemented, and this can take anywhere between 1 to 3 months to implement a full contract management solution, it can again start promoting the robust new tendering and sourcing strategies and processes needed, and provide a central location for the new contract models and the best practices, workflows, and all the templates.
Yeah, a good contract management system can be used to move the contractor's focus away from reactivity and a claims culture towards identifying and being rewarded for proactivity. So zero claims could be a reality, and there are some oil and gas majors out there that are contemplating it in projects. And all this can be documented and monitored in the system, so providing incentives to the contractors, continued support for the refinery objectives as they evolve, and also feed in back into those future bid list evaluations when you're sourcing for your bids.
A contract management solution supports and encourages the use of lessons learned and KPI tracking on the STOs and projects. Nothing is lost. Everything is fully visible to stakeholders, and it maintains all the history.
Moving on, Sarah's people objectives are probably pretty familiar to anyone listening in today. This area is where the focus is on the soft stuff, the skills development, team spirit and morale. But underlying that, it's all driven by the need to gain competitive advantage.
While recommending more resources, and it's clear that they're needed in many cases on these turnarounds, this is also often a very hard sell with management, and particularly in the current environment. It is possible to use systems like Procon to deploy talented and motivated people into these roles within the STO teams, but using the systems to enable mentors to advise and track their decisions and activities. Soft skills are usually best developed through coaching and mentoring. Having a solution like Procon, which tracks performance using real KPIs, documenting all communications, pays contractors not only correctly but on time, and helps the owner-operator develop both the internal team as well as create better relationships with their contractors. Maybe something like this would be better here.
Also, to support the peak need in an STO for people, she's recommending a comprehensive cross-training program across the organization. So that's between the capital projects teams, the ops guys, engineering, and the STO teams. So it's a mixture of all these resources who can be developed and can step in, and using a transparent system can provide the resources needed when it peaks.
Team building is often ignored and overlooked, and an area for improving performance. Sarah recommends that refinery management has funding and resources available to host social events and activities with customers and contractors. Yeah,
and an STO task force, and with one eye on the attendee list, I personally propose it be led by the contracts guys to develop, propose and adopt new optimized and lean work processes around all aspects of the administration of STO contracts. And then these new STO-specific optimized procedures and processes could then be rolled out across the other refineries in the organization. What this approach does, though, it gives all the disciplines involved in these task forces a stake in the game, so they enables them to create better, more streamlined processes, which they then own and can track performance. Also, a one-team approach for STO planning and execution during the shutdown or turnaround. That means essentially early involvement for all disciplines, not just the engineering guys who are involved in the planning.
Yes, similar to the recommendations for the contractor, Sarah proposes incentivizing the staff for productivity increases, advanced warnings, risk avoidance, prevention of schedule slippages, and cost overruns.
Yeah, and she needs to plan for better stakeholder engagement, manage the management team's expectations, use the technology that's available to communicate progress and flag issues timely and at the right level, certainly before they become more difficult to address.
In Procon, there's dashboards in the contract management solution to provide all stakeholders with visibility of the STO critical key performance indicators. These can be tendering schedule of planned versus actual, so you don't slip on tendering schedules, contractor actual performance, contractor payments, contract and contractor changes as they evolve. Can be in the dashboard.
Tying together all Sarah's recommendations and forming the central theme for today's webinar, Sarah has the following proposals for her board concerning contracting systems and processes.
I think any effective contracts management solution would have to have most, if not all, the features like contracts group acting as the hub of a central coordinating point, if you like. This would be for all STO activities, providing full transparency into contracts, contractors, communication, and performance available across the entire STO internal and external team.
Yeah, and she needs a single central formal repository for all commercial correspondence, so she can completely replace daily, weekly, monthly reports with live user dashboards.
Yes, complete visibility in these dashboards would include potential claims, cost overruns, schedule slippages. And of course, I think to make the solution like this work, interfaces will be necessary with existing enterprise systems such as the finance system, maybe the cost control, and the scheduling systems.
Right. And she needs a system that enables her to be proactive around claims, that single source of truth, containing chronicles, complete transactional histories of how decisions were made that end up as a claim. She needs to manage sourcing, tendering, and particularly those negotiations online. Then she can start monitoring and capturing ongoing contractor performance and perform assessments. She can use the system for approvals, review workflows, all of which can be streamlined or configurable and transparent to everybody on the team. And all of that together facilitates an open learning organization, one that's able to share best practices, templates, and work together productively.
Well, Sarah's final report to the executive includes an executive summary, which focuses everyone's minds on the key risks and needs for better STO performance.
Yeah, and here they are. She listed them. To implement a contract management solution within the next 4 months and manage the STOs as whole business events. And secondly, she needs to get a culture change facilitated with all the stakeholders working collaboratively as one team, doing more with less, but it will be the supply chain group's job to lead that, to act as the hub for that culture change. To move the organization during STOs to a proactive live visibility and handling of contractor status changes and claims, get away from those reports. Also to contemplate new contract strategies, new methods using hybrids, not to exceed targets. This all works well with a robust formal change management process, and as long as you've got teeth in your contract. And finally, to reduce and ultimately with the aim to eliminate informal lines of communication, so that ultimately everything goes into the contract management system at the end of the day, so it can be your single source of truth. Cross-train resourcing of STO contract management function during critical pre-award negotiations and embedded into the STO execution also provides future fully developed resources. Integrate STO disciplines around the supply chain management, contracts, Procon contract system using as a hub, as Peter said, one single source of the truth. Contract management cost, engineering, maintenance, scheduling, etc. Another key area is to unify the management of change processes. So get all the procedures documented, identify members for a sitting change management board, if you like, so they can all address the usual areas for change control, the technical changes, time, schedule changes, cost changes, and the commercial and terms and conditions contractual changes. And then finally, get in place full audit trails, whatever way you want to do that, for post-contract management, so you can drive lessons learned in the organization and support your future sourcing and bid list development, so you get better bid lists out of it at the end of the day.
Well, Peter, we have covered a lot of ground for a very complex and often challenging topic today.
Yeah, Jack, it would seem appropriate to wrap up with the opening words Sarah used when addressing the board.
Oh, yeah, yes, and she started by stating contract management, a new definition is needed.
Yeah, and her new definition is it's all about creating and maintaining a framework for collaboration. It takes a whole village. It's a whole business event. Contract management solutions like Procon deliver this.
Well, that is our webinar for today. We hope everyone has reflected on some of our experiences and offered some insights on the benefits of the technology in STOs.
Yeah, thanks, Jack, for supporting this. I've been using CM systems like Procon for, well, over 11 years now across a variety of projects in the energy sector. And hopefully this composite case studies highlighted some of the unique features of this system and also highlighted some other areas.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing your insights and experience through your career with us today. We're now open for questions, and let's see if we can answer your questions.
Hi, Peter. Hi, Jack. Just thought I'd chime in. So because we've got a couple of minutes left, we did have a couple of questions come in. So we've got one from Chris Y, which is how do you capture KPIs and at what level and how do you use them to recalculate outcomes, whether positive or negative? Who would like to answer that one?
Okay. Peter, you want me to take that?
Yeah, sure. Wow, that's a big question for a couple of minutes.
Yes.
Level of KPIs. Well, with KPIs, the higher the level, the better in many cases, in my opinion. You can get them rolled up into something really meaningful around the contract. And again, they all operate differently on a contract-by-contract basis. The key focus, though, today was less on KPIs, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, but it's really about how do we get to start up back up on time. In our case study with Carla, yet again, they didn't manage the startup to get that startup on time, and every delay cost them production. So that's a major KPI. That's one that, if you like, wraps everybody together. So I don't know if you've anything to add to that, Jack.
Yeah, let me add how Procon collects the KPIs.
Sure.
All of the data input into Procon around the tendering, the pre-award, and the post-award, all of that data is put into a data warehouse in which then we run our dashboards and analytics off of. So every technical variation request, every minutes of meetings, every communication, every tendering start date, final date, every estimate of that tender, what it would cost and what it ended up being, are all put in the data warehouse, and we come up with the KPIs from that data. And it is a self-service data warehouse BI environment in which people can create their own dashboards and their own KPIs. And so that's how we do it. We have a suggestion in our solution of what these KPIs should be. So we give example KPIs and dashboards as part of our delivery. But my experience is that everyone ends up somewhat customizing those to their own needs because it's very particular to each site.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Peter. I'm afraid that is all we've got time for today. We're running out of time, so I'll have to wrap up, I'm afraid. There were a couple of other questions. What we'll do, we'll make sure that those questions are put to Peter and Jack, and they can get in touch with you personally. If you had a question that you didn't ask, but you want to get in touch with Jack or Peter, after the webinar today, you can see their details on the screen now, so please get in touch. Like I said, we'll also be sending out all the webinar recordings along with the slides that Jack and Peter used today, and again their contact details. They will come out to you next week, so look out for those, and please do get in touch if you have any feedback or thoughts on that. All there is left to say is many thanks again, Jack and Peter, for your contribution today, and thanks everyone else for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you.